Why black people shouldn't be Republican nor Democrat. Let's kill the lie once and for all, the party switch, and why black folks moved. Let's start with facts, not feelings. The Republican Party was founded in 1854 to stop the spread of chattel slavery and eventually end it. Period. That's not up for debate. That's why after the Civil War, black people rode with Republicans heavy. That was the party of Abraham Lincoln, emancipation and Reconstruction. At that time, the Democratic Party, especially in the South, was openly the party of white supremacy, Jim Crow, and keeping black folks out of power by any means necessary. So yes, historically speaking, black people were Republicans first. That part is true. But here's where people stop telling the full story. The first crack in the relationship. Fast forward to the Great Depression. Everything collapses. Jobs gone, money gone, hope gone. Republican President Herbert Hoover basically told the country the market will fix itself. Meanwhile, black folks were already at the bottom, so when the floor fell out, we fell the farthest. Enter Franklin D. Roosevelt. Now let's be clear, FDR wasn't perfect, and the New Deal had racist flaws. But for the first time, the federal government said, we're stepping in to help poor and working people survive. Jobs programs, relief, infrastructure. That mattered. Black folks didn't switch parties overnight, but the seed was planted. Who is actually trying to help us eat? Civil rights changed everything. The real shift comes after World War II. In 1948, Democratic President Harry S. Truman desegregated the U.S. military. That wasn't symbolic. That was the federal government saying, segregation stops here. Southern white Democrats lost it. That's when you start seeing the cracks inside the Democratic Party, racists versus reformers. Then John F. Kennedy comes along and openly pushes civil rights legislation. He didn't get it passed before his assassination, but he forced the issue into the spotlight. And then comes the heavyweight champ, Lyndon B. Johnson. LBJ pushed through the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, laws that dismantled legal segregation and voter suppression. Now watch closely. Those laws passed over the loud objections of Republican presidential nominee Barry Goldwater, who hid behind states' rights. And the segregationists, they didn't disappear. They switched teams. Former Dixiecrats like Strom Thurmond and Jesse Helms packed their bags and joined the Republican Party. That's the real party switch, not black people leaving, but racists relocating. About Supreme Court decisions, because folks love to be loud and wrong. Cases like Brown v. Board of Education and Roe v. Wade weren't Democrat decisions or Republican decisions. At the time, both parties were split. Support and opposition existed on both sides. Party ideology hardened later, after the civil rights era forced everybody to pick a side. Now let's talk about MLK. Was Martin Luther King Jr. a Republican? No. Was he a Democrat? Also no. MLK wasn't loyal to a party, he was loyal to justice. But here's the part they don't like telling you. Strong federal enforcement of civil rights, labor unions, anti-poverty programs, wealth redistribution, calling out capitalism, militarism, and racism together. That man said America was exploiting the poor and waging unjust wars. That don't sound like modern conservatism at all. People who try to claim MLK as a Republican are confusing 1860s Republicans with post-1960s Republicans, and that's either ignorance or dishonesty. The bottom line, black people didn't abandon the Republican Party. We followed policy, protection, power, when Democrats began using federal power to protect black citizenship, and Republicans began absorbing former segregationists and opposing that power, black voters made a logical move. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't brainwashing. It was survival. Party names stayed the same. The ideologies flipped, and history proves it every single time. The narrative around party loyalty often overlooks the evolution of values and policy preferences. As the years passed, the Republican platform transformed under the weight of changing political tides and societal norms. By the 1980s, leaders like Ronald Reagan began appealing to conservative ideologies that resonated with many Americans, yet that included a distinct move away from the principles of the party's founding. Despite this shift, many black voters remained skeptical, recalling the historical context that shaped their initial alignment with the Republican Party. The memories of Lincoln and emancipation held weight, but the realities of systemic racism and economic struggles took precedence over nostalgia. Activists within the community began advocating for an assessment of which party truly represented their interests today, prompting discussions about social justice and economic equality. The question lingered: how could they reconcile their past loyalty with the modern-day implications of policy decisions? As conversations unfolded, it became evident that traditional party lines no longer defined the values of the population. The modern struggle revolved around understanding which party genuinely prioritized policies that uplifted marginalized communities, especially in the face of rising inequality and social injustice. Activists highlighted disparities in education, healthcare, and employment opportunities, demanding accountability and action. With every election cycle, the stakes grew more pronounced, forcing Black Americans to navigate a complex landscape where historical allegiances contended with urgent contemporary realities. As the political climate continued to evolve, so did the determination of many to seek a framework for engagement that could address the systemic issues facing their communities today. As the winds of change swept through the political landscape, a new generation of leaders emerged, eager to forge a path that embraced inclusivity and justice. Figures like Barack Obama symbolized a possible reconciliation between Black Americans and the Democratic Party, attracting unprecedented voter turnout and engagement. His message of hope and change resonated deeply, echoing past struggles while igniting new conversations around unity and progress. Yet, the question remained: could any party genuinely commit to dismantling the structures of power that had historically oppressed marginalized communities? As the electorate grew more diverse, the expectations for representation became increasingly pronounced, requiring a new social contract that prioritized equity. This moment called for vigilance and collective action, empowering Black voters to reclaim their agency and insist on a political framework that addressed their needs. Ultimately, the journey forward hinged on a shared recognition that America's promise must include everyone and that true justice necessitated active participation in shaping the future. The struggle for power, protection, and policy would continue to define the narrative as communities collaboratively sought to hold elected officials accountable in their pursuit of equality. The landscape of political allegiance was shifting, and the urgency for change rippled throughout the nation as communities began to rally for a new approach. Grassroots organizations proliferated, fostering dialogue and mobilization around critical issues, from police reform to economic equity. Town halls buzzed with energy as citizens sought to amplify their voices, demanding not just recognition, but genuine representation. The contrasts grew stark. While one party leaned heavily into traditional conservatism, the other started positioning itself as a champion for those historically marginalized. This moment of reckoning urged individuals to reassess their roles within this evolving narrative, as alliances formed around power rather than mere party identity. Activists reminded their peers that voting was not just a right, but a weapon to dismantle oppression, encouraging strategic participation in primaries and local elections. Each ballot cast was a stand against inertia, a declaration that their communities would not be sidelined in the political conversation. In this environment, the path forward appeared less about loyalty to a single party and more about alignment with values that resonated with the fight for justice. Amidst this backdrop of change, the question of accountability became increasingly essential. Activists recognized that engaging with the political process required more than simple allegiance. It demanded a fierce commitment to demanding actionable policies. They held forums, inviting candidates to articulate how they intended to address systemic racism and economic disparities. Communities united around town hall meetings, eager to challenge the status quo, ensuring that their concerns were not merely acknowledged but deeply integrated into platforms moving forward. Empowerment took on a new meaning as knowledge transformed into a tool for advocacy, equipping citizens to navigate complexities with clarity and purpose. In this pivotal landscape, individuals began to come together, bridging gaps through shared experiences and collective narratives. Conversations that once felt uncomfortable now transformed into powerful dialogues about intersectionality and its impact on political dynamics. The journey toward true equity and justice is ongoing as communities strive to redefine their power and influence within the political sphere. In understanding their historical context, Black Americans are reclaiming their voices, ensuring that their needs guide future policies. Ultimately, the commitment to justice remains unwavering, illuminating the path for generations to come.